Oops. All right, you ready, boss?
All set.
Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of Firing Line Radio Show. This is Philip Naiman. I hope you're having a great weekend wherever you are. You know, we have an opportunity to say something I don't get to say very often, and that is that the Second Amendment community has had a huge win in California. That's right. Hold down the fort. We actually had a win. You know, we've got the great ruling of Bruin, right? And the New York Gun and Pistol Club brought that, took it all the way to the Supreme Court. They won, gave us a legitimate ruling on the Second Amendment. And now all the other horrific bills that have been passed and laws legislated against freedom in this country are being retried. And the one we had the success with this week was called the roster bill. Not the rooster, although it looks like one, but it's the roster bill. About 10 years ago, they came up with this scheme, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Jerry Brown et al. They came up with a scheme to limit the number of firearms. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, do not forget his nefarious activity in this. Never forgive him or watch one of his movies again. Came up with this scheme that a firearm had to be deemed safe to be used in California. And the only way you could deem your firearm safe was to pay a $10,000 fee, donate several firearms to the state so they can do drop testing, throw it against the wall, acid dipping, whatever they wanted to do to it to determine it to be safe. After that, Schwarzenegger signed a bill called the micro-stamping bill, saying that no semi-automatics can be added to the semi-automatic pistols can be added to the roster unless they have micro-stamping on the parts, meaning that when a shell was fired, the shell would eject with a identifier on it that would tell you whose gun that came out of. All right. That was actually made into law. Schwarzenegger signed it, says it doesn't matter. The science doesn't work, so it can never be enforced. Well, Kamala Harris was the next attorney general right after him. And she said, yeah, that sounds good. We'll just make it law now, even though the technology doesn't exist, thereby precluding any new semi-automatics into the market of California. What was left was the roster, which meant if you went to a gun store in California, you're going to see the same stuff in every single store unless it's a used rack. You're going to see Smith & Wesson Shield, some XDs, the Glock 19 Generation 3, 17 Generation 3, what are they on, 5 now? You'll never see a 41, a 43, a 47, 48. None of those exist because they came into being after the market or after the handgun roster came out. Anyway, that was just kicked out of court. So I'm sure California will continue to fight it, but just the fact that the federal judges came out and said this didn't exist in 1776, it shouldn't exist now as far as a rule, according to the Bruin law, therefore the roster is hiatus. Hit the road, Jack. So that's a great thing. So obviously you should be buying, firearm company stocks these days because everybody who's had their wish list denied because it wasn't available in California soon should have that availability opened up. Anyway, that was a great thing. We want to just mention that. Tracy Hill is my guest. Tracy Hill is in Ohio, the free state of Ohio, and he is a specialist on the Thompson submachine gun. Tracy, you ever heard of such a crazy thing as that roster?
I've heard of many schemes, but I have to admit that California always takes the cake when it comes to stupid.
Well, nothing exceeds like excess.
Exactly. It's a good thing you guys don't get all the government you pay for out there.
We try.
Sounds like it.
Well, we even have billion-dollar surpluses that disappear. So it's a wonderful thing. Anyway, yeah, like 80 billion a year disappear. after 80 billion, it's kind of serious money.
Yeah.
But 50 billion here, 50 billion there. Who really counts that? That's like nothing. Chump change. Anyway, Tracy Hill is an author. Tracy Hill is a firearm historian. Tracy Hill is a know-it-all about a very specific firearm, and know-it-all in a good way. That's why we have him on here, in a good way, about the Thompson submachine gun. Now, What the heck is a Thompson? If you don't know, stop listening now. Go look it up. All right. Because this is one of the most iconic firearms of the 20th century. Everybody's seen it. It's the chopper, right? You go get the chopper. You even seen it. I've seen it recently used in a movie in 1923, right? It kind of surprised me when that popped out. But anyway, I won't give you a spoiler alert, but it's in there. Tracy, you are the author of 3 books on the Thompson Center. You're the Thompson American Legend, the Ultimate Thompson Book, and you're finishing the Thompson Encyclopedia. And those are available on Amazon, or some of them are available on Amazon. His
Correct.
website is machinegunboards.com. Look up American Thompson Association on that, and you can contact him if you want a signed copy, right?
Correct.
Very good. So let's give a little bit of history of why you were interested in this firearm, and then we'll talk about the firearm itself.
Well, basically, I guess I grew up in a house that we were taught firearms safety, and I was a trap shooter in the beginning. But growing up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was all kinds of television shows that had the Thompson featured, like Rat Patrol and the FBI story, and et cetera, et cetera. And I just always thought that was a pretty cool movie.
You probably thought your trap score would go up if you were using a Thompson too, right?
Well, it never did for some strange reason. But I ended up with less money to spend on ammunition for traps. So I ended up buying my first Thompson with my help from my father, who had been trained on the gun in the Army Air Corps.
Oh, wow. What year was that?
That was 86, 87. And it's kind of been like eating potato chips. You just can't stop at one. And the history just sucks you in.
So very cool. That's your personal history with them. Now, was that made by Auto Ordnance in 86, 87?
The gun that I bought, yes, was the problem with calling it made by Auto Ordnance. Auto Ordnance has had a number of owners,
right?
Just like any gun collecting hobby. So the key is trying to figure out which Auto Ordnance era you're talking about.
Okay, so we'll go back to that because Thompson was actually named after a person.
Correct. General John Thompson.
You know, I'm glad you said that. I thought his name was Gene, but hey, General John Thompson. You correct me before I make my mistakes. We'll get along a lot better.
That's fine. James was actually his father. Okay. James was what sent him down the road.
So tell us about that.
Well, James was a Congressional Medal of Honor winner during the Civil War. And because of that, his son was able to go to West Point. So John went to West Point, came out of there and went into
what year?
1882.
80s? Yeah,
1882. And from there, he went into coastal artillery. And during the Spanish-American War, actually started to get into Army Ordnance and ended up as the head ordnance officer for the expedition into Cuba.
Now, what year was the expedition into Cuba? 98 or something?
98, yeah, something like that.
And I just remember that because they had the Spanish Mauser that year. So
correct. There you go. All right. Well, that's actually why John started to pay attention to small arms in particular, was because he came up against the Mausers and smokeless powder. Most of the American guns at the time were firing black powder and were single shot.
Like 30-40 Craigs or something?
Exactly. And so he took it upon himself after that.
Let's just talk about this distinction between smokeless and black powder.
Right.
Smokeless powder, if you're shooting back in the woods, you know, you can get away with it. With a black powder round, you've got a nice big ring of smoke right in front of you. Not only does that mark your location, but you can't see through it for your second shot. So a lot of reasons that an army would want to, as quickly as possible, move off of black powder to smokeless, not to mention the volatility, right?
The volatility, it can be handled, but the other big problem with black powder is corrosion.
Yeah.
And if you aren't cleaning a gun religiously with black powder, the gun will corrode and become inoperable.
The other point of that is if you're putting a signature from wherever you're firing from, you don't live long enough to have to clean your gun. So
True.
It works itself out in the long run.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, if you mark your position, the enemy may return artillery fire back on you rather than shoot at you with a rifle.
It's not a good thing to say, hey, I'm over here in any time or fashion. Okay, so the general was in the Cuban conflict, Spanish American War, and decided that smokeless powder was a way to go. We're going to have to take a break right here, but want to set this up about what he decided to do about it. And this was General John Thompson. Right about the turn of the century, gets a great idea. And Tracy, I'll let you pick it up from there.
Okay.
Hope we got to go to a break. This is our break where I set the timer again.
Cut and paste.
That's it. That's a break. Need a coffee, need to blow your nose. Let me let the dog out. Come on, fat dog. Go out. Come on. Out. All right, stay there. Crazy dog. All right. Ready?
Yep.
Hey, folks, welcome back to Firing Line Radio Show. Philip Naiman. Get our podcasts at firinglineradio.com, firinglineradio.com. You can also find them on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever else you get your stuff on there. We do have them under, strangely enough, Firing Line Radio, and our YouTube channel at Firing Line Radio also. So that's where they are. I hope you are going to listen to them. If you want to get some swag, we got some pretty cool hats and shirts still. That's firinglineradio.com. And all of our vendor discounts are on there. Very important. You want to save 15% on things like Maglite or Macmillan MC3 stocks, or $50 on EMP shields. We even have cutting edge bullets, 50% or 15% off on that. So we've got some great vendor discounts on there. They got the codes on the site. Just use them. I'd love to have my supporters, continue to support us, and you get a big discount on that. So check that out at firinglineradio.com. Joining me back here, I have Tracy Hill. Tracy Hill, the author of Thompson, the American Legend, the Ultimate Thompson Book, and even the Thompson Encyclopedia. And what we're talking about is the person who invented the Thompson, and his name, oddly enough, is Thompson.
General John Thompson. You keep messing that.
So General John Thompson, a veteran of the Spanish-American conflict.
Correct.
Fought in Cuba. And what was his decision after that nefarious deal?
Well, actually, after the Cuban conflict, he came back to the States and resigned from the military and went to work for Remington. Under Remington's guidance or employment, he helped set up the Eddystone Rifle Factory at Eddystone, Pennsylvania, and put into production also the Bridgeport ammunition plant for Remington. But also in his free time, he started studying designs for breech locking mechanisms for a fully automatic weapon. And he stumbled into the patent design by a gentleman by the name of Captain John Blish. And from that, he hired an engineer, went to work in his house in Pennsylvania, Eddystone, and they started to study this particular pistol. This is what is known to collectors as the Blish pistol. It was the patent design that Captain John Blish gave to the patent office to demonstrate his locking mechanism. And from this, the engineers then set up operations in Cleveland and began to experiment with the locking mechanism. You say breech locking. Can you explain that, please? Basically, on this pistol, and it's a chambered in 7.62, and this is a Luger barrel. When the gun fires, and it's fired by a lanyard pull on the trigger, before the cartridge completely exits the muzzle, the chamber pressure is dropped enough that this sliding wedge slides downward and locks into place, and the remaining gases then eject the cartridge out the back and shoot it off to the right on the ramp. And then the gun is reloaded by simply inserting another cartridge, and the whole process is repeated.
So his was a single shot that just showed how it would eject
It
immediately.
was simply a patent design to show how this locking mechanism worked.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
And from that, the engineers went to work in Cleveland and started work outside a company called Warner Swayze up there. Warner Swayze helped them with the R&D on the metallurgy. And they tried the design with a rifle design, which really did not work for them. But they did find that the only cartridge that did work very well with this locking mechanism, that was the 45 ACP, which General Thompson had actually also been involved in the creation of the cartridge because of the testing that he had done under the Lagarde testing for the Army up in Chicago, testing what bullets had the greatest stopping power. He also then later became involved in the 1911 process.
You know, if you start saying bullets have the greatest stopping power, we're going to run into the 9mm versus 45 conflict. And
that is exactly
oh
what
my
the
goodness, here we
argument
go.
was about. Yeah, that was exactly what the argument was about. And what they found in their testing on steers basically was that took one slug from the 45 to drop a steer, whereas it took several on the 9mm.
So if you're ever against a 1,600-pounder, you better have your 45 ready.
Yeah, stop the bull in his tracks.
That would do it. Okay, continue, please.
Well, once they decided on the 45 cartridge, they then developed a series of 40 prototypes that were known as the models of 1919. This is one of the models of 1919. No two of the guns are identical. This is the oldest handheld American submachine gun in private hands. All the older ones are in museums like West Point or Rock Island Arsenal.
Now, John, did that cost you more than a Yugo, a used Yugo?
At the time, believe it or not, no. Because when I started in the hobby in '87, you could buy prototypes cheaper than you could buy production guns. Because nobody wanted prototypes because you couldn't shoot them. So I fell in love with the prototypes being an engineer. Most of these guns actually have the original scribe lines from the engineers still on them. And it was fascinating to look behind the eyes to see how somebody else was thinking.
Folks, if you're just listening to this on the radio, he's holding up the pistol version, right? What would you call his version of the prototype?
This is the model of 1919. This is not the pistol version. This is the only version at the time.
Right.
The gun was designed to not have a buttstock, no rear sights, and only fired in fully automatic. And this is what he was going to give to every troop crossing no man's land in World War I, which was going on at the time that this gun was designed to take out enemy defenses.
Yeah, just a wall of fire.
Yep. This particular gun could fire 1,500 rounds per minute, which means that with a 20-round box mag, it was out of ammunition in a heartbeat.
Yeah. You'd be dropping magazines all the time. The barrel has a very unique feature on it, the first 10 or 12 inches of it.
Well, the guns of the era had what were called radiator barrels, and they basically had these fin patterns on them. The Lewis gun had it. The French had it on their heavy machine guns. And basically it was to dispense the heat. They felt that the radiators would keep the barrels from warping and give the barrels longer life.
Did it, or was it just a cool factor?
It was a design factor of the time. It was a common practice. Later, the fins were done away with and the barrel retained its same thickness and functioned just as well.
Yeah, very cool. So that's the first prototype, 1919. And then how's our history go from there?
Well, from there, once they ended up with a final design, they contracted with Colt Patent Firearms to create 15,000 production models of the Colt Thompson submachine gun. Now, this is your gangster era, FBI era gun.
What year was that?
This is 1921. This is actually the 60th gun produced. Some of the features that you'll notice the difference between the 1919s is it now has a buttstock, but the buttstock is removable. It has a rear sight. The cocking handle's in the middle now instead of being offset. And it has a feature for semi-automatic fire. This was what was envisioned to go to war in World War One. But the war ended, and Colt and Auto Ordnance ended up with 15,000 of these sitting on the shelf, wondering what to do with them. Of course, after World War One, the Depression and everything, military wasn't interested in buying new weaponry. They also weren't convinced on the idea. Law enforcement at the time didn't have an idea of what to do with it. The only people who were actually very free thinkers and who had money were, of course, the criminal element. And at the time,
free thinkers.
Free thinkers. They always would think outside the box.
That they do. And, I'm gonna hold you there. We're gonna pick it up after this next commercial here, just as we're coming into the era of the Choppa. Hey, folks, Philip Naiman, Firing Line Radio Show here with Tracy Hill, Thompson Encyclopedia author. We'll be right back after this. Okay, we're ready to go. Hey, folks, welcome back to Firing Line Radio Show. I hope you're having a great day. We are learning so much here about the Thompson submachine gun. Tracy Hill is the authority on this. I mean, the man's written not only the ultimate Thompson book, but the Thompson Encyclopedia. So we're going to trust his judgment as we go through here. We just finished up the development of the firearm. 15,000 were made through Colt. They're sitting around. The mafia says, hey, you know what, this, forget about it. This would be a pretty good thing. You know, bada boom, bada bing. We could use these things. So the next version of this gun, or the next iteration of this firearm, happened in the late 20s.
Correct. This is a 1920s era, and this was the design that you saw from about the 1920s to about 1939.
Okay.
But the gangsters liked it because it was portable. It was actually very cheap to purchase at the time. You could buy one of these at any good hardware store for $200. There was no laws against it because the laws had not caught up with the technology. Most machine guns of the era were crew-served heavy weapons, and most people didn't understand that these even existed.
Okay, so this is the version that you saw in all of the Hollywood movies of the time, right?
Correct. And the one thing that people don't understand is you see them all the time, that every gangster in Hollywood has one under his coat or in his violin case. Let's dispense a couple of myths right there. First of all, this won't fit in a violin case.
You need the cello.
You need the cello, actually the viola.
Okay.
But you know, you always see it in the movies, the guy pulling it out of his violin case and hosing down the room, which is all very well and good, but he continues to keep firing for a good 5-10 minutes, right? Well, those were the rare belt-fed Thompsons, because the ammunition was going up his shirt sleeve, going out the back, and to the prop master behind him. The other thing that people don't understand about movies from that time period is there was no such thing as a squib. And a squib is where, you know, if you shoot at an actor behind him, the wall explodes or whatever to simulate gunfire. In the 1920s, they actually had paid marksmen shooting at the actors. And it was a common tradition that the night before the big shoot, so to speak, the main actor would take the shooter out to dinner and tuck him in bed to make sure that he was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed the next morning. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. but the Thompson became very popular in cinematography. But in real life, the actual number of cases where the Thompson was used were very low compared to just using a pistol or a shotgun.
Right. And once again, just like the stupid laws and assault weapon laws and stuff like that, it looks mean. It's really loud. It's in the movies, therefore it must be reality, right? So more people are killed in the 1920s and 30s with handguns and shotguns. The 1897 pump shotgun, right?
Yep.
They're racking around with that all the time, but the submachine gun gets blamed. You know, and like you said, you pull the trigger, it's got 1,500 rounds a minute. You got a 20-round stick or even a 50-round stick. You're out of bullets in about 2 seconds.
Well, this one they'd actually lowered the rate of fire down to about 800 rounds per minute.
Oh,
So
that'll last all day. Yeah.
yeah, and according to Hollywood, yes, it'll last at least 5 minutes on the screen when in actuality is about 10, 15 seconds. But it was still very popular in Hollywood. It looked good on the screen. It had moving parts. You had a big muzzle flash out of the front end. So
And now, how about the brake? Is that the first brake that was used on an arm, small arm?
you talking about the muzzle brake?
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, it wasn't. The first one was actually on the BARs and shotguns of the era, all designed by the same gentleman by the name of Richard Cutts.
But that really does help keep the nose down, right?
It really depends on the shooter.
True.
Most people find that after a little bit of experience, you don't need it. The other big problem with the muzzle brakes on Thompsons is they're hard to clean. So if you're gonna shoot one, most people will actually, prefer one without the muzzle brake on the front.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay, so this era, the gangster era, the Great Depression, leads us up to World War II.
Correct.
And
During
here's
World War
the star of the
War
show
II,
is the Thompson.
the star of the show is the Thompson. When Germany starts overrunning Poland and the lowlands, and eventually France, all the Allied troops are running up against the German MP-40, and they have no answer to it. So the only gun that was readily available and in production was the Thompson submachine gun. She was obsolete by the time the war started, but because she was available, she was the only thing thrown into the fire. The gun was put back into production because Colt had built the 15,000 and stopped at that point. It was put back into production this time by Savage Firearms for auto ordnance. And a couple of years into the U.S. involvement in the war, auto ordnance finally set up its own factory in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
So auto ordnance was controlling the design and just parting out all the job shops.
Correct. Up until the factory in Bridgeport, Connecticut, they didn't have their own factory.
Interesting. Okay. How many weapons were made for World War II?
That's a subject of debate among historians. But basically, between the first design, the model of 1928, and the later designs called the M1, you're looking at probably very close to 2 million guns were produced, or 2 million guns and spare parts were produced during the war. And that's the production that was done here in the United States. The Chinese, even in the 1920s, had set up their own factory and were producing them in China as well.
For use where?
In China originally. Later on, some of them were actually found in Korea and in Vietnam against us. But originally, China was using them for fighting against the Japanese.
Right. That's what I was thinking. So in the 20s, they started building them, but they didn't. What year was the Japanese? 39 or 40? They went into China.
They went into China in late 38, 39.
38,
and the Chinese warlords and military at the time did have a few Thompsons, but not enough to stop the Japanese.
No, not enough. That's for sure. Okay, so World War II, were they mainly deployed in the European theater, Pacific, or both?
The Thompson saw use in every theater of the war. It was actually supplied to everybody. Every country, every allied country that we have found printed a manual on it, including the Germans and the Japanese, because like any army, when you pick up arms from people you've defeated, you put them in use. And the Germans were very good at doing that in their secondary line troops. They would use captured weapons. So you had to have manuals to teach your troops how to use them. So the Thompson really became a worldwide recognized firearm by everybody, friend and foe.
And how many of the World War II guns are still in circulation?
That in circulation, if you mean available for ownership by private hands, ATF is telling us that somewhere around about 10, 15,000 maximum are available.
And those are the full auto mode, right?
Correct.
So they'd be registered class 3 weapons.
All machine guns had to be registered starting in 1934, and the registration closed in 1968. I'm sorry, 86. Sorry.
Yeah, which is interesting. So if you had one of those earlier serial numbers, it's worth a fortune now.
Well, pretty much right now, if it's registered on the registry, they're all worth a fortune now.
Exactly.
Because there can be no more put onto it.
Exactly. Supply and demand. You gotta love that. Okay, folks. So used in World War II, didn't make World War I, used in World War II, got a great history in Hollywood. Unfortunately, because of its history in Hollywood, it was probably put on the ban list early, but that's what happens with success. And we're going to talk more about the actual specs, the firings, the cartridges, everything involved with that, the different versions of them when we come back with Tracy Hill. Tracy Hill, the author of Thompson, the American Legend, and some other great books you can find at Amazon. That would be amazon.com. Or you can contact him and actually have him sign them for you. I think actually if you send in an extra check, you can get a signed Thompson, but you'll have to negotiate with him what the size of that check is going to be. We'll be right back after this, folks. Have a great day. Okay. All right, Tracy, this is our last segment. Okay. So is there anything specific you want to cover?
I guess if you want to cover ownership now, that's fine. Or what's available, even if you don't want to go through the hassles of full-lay automatic weapons.
In the 80s, okay, I worked in a gun store. And we sold Thompsons, and they had feeding issues. So let's talk about how those are, the reliability issues are changed, all that other stuff too, the specs on the gun, and then how to get one.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yep.
Hey folks, welcome back to Firing Line Radio Show. Philip Naiman here. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are. It's raining where I am. Here with Tracy Hill. Tracy Hill, the author of Thompson, the American Legend, the ultimate Thompson book, Thompson Encyclopedia, and Thompson 1, 2, 3 for kindergartners. So it's a coloring book, but you want to make sure it's in your school. It's probably the best coloring book they're ever going to find, right? It's Second Amendment friendly. So make sure if you haven't done one yet, buy one, put it in your local kindergarten. Just for fun. Okay, that may not exist, but it should. You do need a coloring book for kindergartners. Or you can work on that.
There already is coloring books for kindergartners, and dealing with all machine guns.
Well, see, I wasn't too far off, and I made that up. That's art imitates science. Okay, let's talk about the tech specs on the Thompson 1927, 28, whatever version you're talking, whatever it takes, whatever version you're talking about here. They were made fully auto, but then after 34, it became more difficult to buy. So then they started doing the semi-auto version for civilians. Well, after World War II, right?
Yeah, most of the semi-automatic only guns came about 1959. And were produced by a company by the name of Numrich, operating under the guise of Auto Ordnance Corporation. And they made them with a 16-inch barrel and firing only in semi-automatic.
Now, when did the military wean off the Thompson?
Toward the end of World War II, the U.S. military started to wean off the Thompson, and they went on to like the grease gun, and later then into the M16 era. But during World War II, the British got their Sten submachine guns up and running, and the Russians got their PPSH 41s in operation. So by end of World War II, the gun was obsolete.
Okay. Well, you might call it obsolete. I think they're still pretty cool. All right. Yeah. So the current versions then, semi-automatic, the traditional look on them had the 100-round drum. Is it 100 or 50?
Both. You can buy it either way.
How long does it take to load 100 rounds in that drum?
It's actually deceptively easy because most people
a key lock or
realize
something?
Yeah, you push the key to the side and the whole front cover comes off, and then you load it in a spiral like a racetrack, and then put it together and you wind it up like a wind-up toy. And that's how the drum feeds. So it's actually not that hard to load.
Well, it's not that quick to load either, but then it is 100 rounds.
Yeah. And it's also one of these cases that when you do have it loaded and in the gun, you bring it to your shoulder and you start shooting as fast as possible because the weight, it becomes cumbersome for most people.
That's true.
Think about 2 boxes of 50, 45 caliber ammunition. That's not the lightest thing in the world.
Does it operate better on the 230 grain bullet, or are there certain grains it doesn't?
Typically on the 230 grain full metal jacket.
Okay.
The fully automatics, though, have been known to fire even with 45 caliber wad cutter.
Well, they're a little sloppier on the ramp feed.
Yeah.
Now, years ago, the auto ordinance in our era, the 80s, had some feeding issues. How did they overcome those?
Well, for one thing, the company changed hands and got bought by Car Arms. And Car Arms now operates auto ordnance today, and they've made a number of manufacturing changes to improve reliability. But normally, the biggest problem with any firearm is always going to be the magazine. And if you bend the lips on the magazines, they won't feed no matter how good the gun is.
Okay. And magazines are still readily available. Now, actually, let me jump back here, folks. If you are in some states, this may not be a legal firearm for you to own. California, it's specifically listed as an assault weapon. Forget about New York, New Jersey, I'm sure. So this is for freedom-loving Americans wherever you are. You still have the opportunity to pick up a Thompson in the semi-automatic mode, unless you have a big check, which you could send to Tracy, and then he'll release one of his special ones for you. But it's got to be a big check because this guy really likes his Thompsons. Anyway,
or you can pick up an airsoft.
We actually have an airsoft. My son has a Thompson airsoft.
The Thompson airsofts are actually a lot of fun to use, and they can go fully automatic.
They do. That's funny you say that. I forgot we even had that.
They're really even fun if you add the light kit to it and fire tracer.
I haven't seen that. That sounds like a lot of fun. That's funny. I forgot he even had that. So firing 230 grainers, how hard is it to magazine change? Is it like an AK, pop out, rock in?
The magazine change, if you're practiced at it, most people can do it in a few seconds. It's very easy. Drop one, pick one up.
Okay. And then so the other thing is, if you do get a Thompson, all right, what does your cost of living go up just to feed it 45 ACP every month?
Well, everybody makes priorities and choices on what they want to do. It's proportional to the cost of the gun.
Well, I would say that, we're just past the first of the year. Everybody has a weight loss goal. So why buy food when you can buy 45 ACP and feed it to your Thompson? You're going to accomplish a couple of goals right there, right? You're going to get thinner. You're going to look better. You're going to have a lot more fun. So, and chicks dig it. So that's a good thing. the new models that are out there, right? You've got the Commando, you've got the traditional. Why don't you give us a quick rundown on those? If I was going to buy one, what would you recommend for me?
Well, basically, they make a what is called the 27A1, which is a 16-inch barrel. You can have the barrel with the fins on it. You can have it with a compensator or no compensator on it. Horizontal or vertical front forearm, basically the same gun.
Is
The
there an
only
advantage in
preference,
shooting between the traditional pistol stock vertical forend versus the one over the barrel, your horizontal? Is there a difference in shooting them to you?
it just really depends on what the shooter is used to using in his hand. And if you buy it one way or the other and you want to switch back and forth, you can do that. The only difference is the length of the screw holding the wood on. That's the only difference between the two. So if you buy it one way, don't like it, you can change it out and put it the other way.
And you're saying that, well, it's a full size heavy gun shooting a 45. So the reason to have a muzzle brake on it, if you can't control a 45 in a rifle that weighs what, 12 pounds, um, you should be
Well,
able to.
12 pounds is a fully automatic gun. So you're looking more like 13, 14 pounds. Yeah, the muzzle brake on the semi-automatics is for looks only.
Right. And the other part of that is, if you're shooting it at night or something, you've got that muzzle brake on there, you're throwing a flash in front of your face. So for defensive purposes, that may not be the way to go.
True. But most people aren't swinging a 16-inch barrel around in a house in a dark environment.
Have you seen our neighborhood?
I'd rather have a shotgun.
Not at 16
Less
inches,
aiming.
folks. 18.1 inches, 18.1 for the shotgun there. Yeah, it'll bring and some of the more iconic uses of this in the movies, right? You've got I just was going to mention it and then I forgot the one with Kevin Costner in it, Untouchables, right?
Untouchables, yeah.
You've seen them work in that. Have you ever been used on the movies for technical expertise?
I have not, but I have helped other people who are the experts on the Hollywood things. But you have, the Untouchables. You had the Road to Perdition, which is ironic because there isn't a single live gun on that movie set. They're all CG'd, fake. But most people didn't know that. But even modern video games nowadays, most kids who play the video games recognize the Thompson because it's featured in Call of Duty, along with a number of other programs.
And available in airsoft, a high quality airsoft gun. Hey,
And available in Airsoft.
now the what is a cost factor? Now we like to we realize that some guy might be riding with his wife in a car, right? And listening to our show, and we don't know what he said it cost him. So everything's like around $100 or so for a firearm, but these are not too terribly over $100. I think it's not as if you're looking into multiple ranges of them. So they are, for what they are, fairly expensive. Are they only made by Auto Ordnance now?
Currently, they are only made by Auto Ordnance. Yes.
And you endorse them? You say hey, everybody should have at least one?
Everybody needs a nice wall hanger.
And a book to go with it. Folks, I want to thank my special guest, Tracy Hill, author of Thompson, the American Legend, the Ultimate Thompson book, Thompson Encyclopedia, and you can find those at Amazon. Their website, machinegunboards.com, American Thompson Association. Tracy, thank you very much. That's our whole show. Hope you have a great day and God bless.
Take care.